Folks, we're going to get started tonight. Welcome to the Osterville Association annual meeting. My name is John Crow, I'm president of the association. We have this every year, obviously, and we thank you all for coming out. And if at some point people want to see this streaming live, they can go downstairs after we have a couple of votes. So that's also possible if you want to do that. So we're going to get right into secretary's report. Did everybody have a chance to read the secretary's report? You have a motion to accept?
Move it.
Okay, a second? Okay, all in favor of accepting the secretary's report for July 19th, 2023, say aye. All opposed? Okay, that passed. Thank you. Treasurer's report. Treasurer Al McKay is having surgery tomorrow for a rotator cuff, so I'm going to do his little report. Basically, we have 3 accounts here at the OVA. We have a checking account that right now, as of today, has $5,479.38 in that account. We also have a money market account that has $2,717.48. And that's with Vanguard. And we also have the Robert Smith Fund for Osterville, that our fund that we disperse, I say grants or gifts to other nonprofits and other worthy institutions in Osterville for projects that we do here. And that balance right now is $17,290. So that's our report for tonight for the treasurer's report. All in favor of accepting the treasurer's report for today, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, moving on again. Bylaws. I set up a committee, we set up a committee in January to look at our bylaws, which we believe probably could be 40 or 50 years old. We had, in 2006, we did some changes to the bylaws, but they've really never been updated. So we got a committee together. We had 2 of our 3 lawyers on that committee, including myself, who's not a lawyer, and a couple others. And we've come up with a new set of bylaws. And I'm going to have Heather Hunt, who's one of those lawyers, go through the bylaws and explain what we're doing tonight.
Sure, thank you. So the bylaws, as recommended by the board, are posted on ovatoday.com, and that link was noted in the little yellow card that you got as notice to this meeting. I'm just gonna bylaws. I could talk about them all night because I like them, but we'll try to make this really quick and move on to the more interesting things. So as John mentioned, the bylaws were particularly old, kind of antiquated, clunky, a little bit hard to even follow just from a sort of process point of view. When John put together a committee, and I also want to add my thanks to Attorney Dick Coleman, who gave us his sort of expertise as we went along with really close legal reads. So I appreciate that. I'll back up. So bylaws are generally just simple operating procedures. How to call a meeting, what's a quorum, what are officers, so on and so forth. Very sort of straightforward operating procedures. The organization can do more than what is called for in the bylaws. For instance, you can post things on the website. There can be additional meetings, but they're just sort of basic operating procedures. So when we went back to look at these really kind of old bylaws, we started from sort of a fresh perspective and did some research on mainstream bylaws for Massachusetts nonprofits. We looked at bylaws of other nonprofits in the area that had been recently updated to take advantage of the work that had been done and so forth. Our committee sort of kicked those back and forth and refined those. We recommended them to the board. In July, the board got together and had a robust discussion about the provisions and adopted them to put forward for your, I'll say, sort of affirmation here this evening. I think with that basic explanation of sort of their purpose, where they're located and so forth, let me just ask for a motion to approve those bylaws. So in a second?
Second.
And before we move to a vote, let me ask if there's any questions or comments on the recommended bylaws. Okay, all in favor, say aye, or show your card. And any opposed? Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Appreciate that. Next up is our election of directors. We have 17 directors when we're full membership-wise. We're between 99 and 17 is what our bylaws stipulate. So right now we have 17 directors, and those are divided into 3 groups that every year there's a new group that comes forward that is put forward by the board to either re-up or new people will come on the board. And so this year we have the board nominees are as follows: Richard Coleman, Robin Crosby, John Crow, Al McKay, and Michael Tolman, who are all members in previous standing, and their terms will be now from 2023 to 2026. So we'd have the board vote on the slate of directors. All in favor of those directors for 3-year term, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. So that's taken care of. Okay, so for the next is the OBPA report, which is the Osterville Business and Professional Association, which is a standing organization, standing subcommittee of the Osterville Business Association. A lot of civic associations have separate groups for the business professionals and businesses and the citizens. We've always believed from the first of our charter that we all work together, and that what's good for the business community is also good for everybody else in the community. So we have that as a standing subcommittee, and Nightingale is the president. She's going to give us a report.
Good evening. As chairman of the Osterville Business and Professional Association, I am pleased to submit our annual report for our 2023 fiscal year. Our financial report: the OBPA balance in Rockland Trust on June 1st, 2022 was $1,037.92. Income was $31,680.78. Expenses, $29,850.64, and a closing balance on May 31st, 2023 was $2,868.06. A detailed report submitted by Sarah Malaspino, OBPA Treasurer, is attached. Our steering committee: a list of the OBPA officers and steering committee members is attached. We welcome Pat Glover of Rockland Trust as our new treasurer, Ray Goulet of Cape Jazz, and Beth Serpenat of 5 Bays Bistro and Crisp as our new steering committee members, to replace Sarah Malaspino, Anne Marie Edwards, and Heather Wilson, whose help has been greatly appreciated, especially Sarah for serving as our treasurer for the past 3 years. We wish Sarah the very best in her promotion at Rockland Trust, unfortunately in a different village than Osterville. So we had to lose her, but we got Pat Glover, who's a good replacement. Christmas charities. This fund is a combined OVA-OBPA effort headed up by Bruce Williams. We were pleased to be able to donate $3,000 each to the Salvation Army and the Cape Cod Needy Times Fund. The OVA-OBPA Scholarship. Abigail Youssef and Isabel Rudy, both of Osterville, were this year's recipients of our $1,500 scholarships. They were both so well qualified that we decided to award 2 scholarships this year. Usually we just do 1. Our annual OBPA meeting was held in June with Mark Ells, Barnstable Town Manager, as our guest speaker. We thank all of the Barnstable departments and the COMM Fire Department for their help during our various celebration days. Our 54th annual Christmas open house and stroll will be held on December 8th this year. Please join us, especially around the creche at 6 p.m., which will be preceded by a Christmas decorated golf cart parade down Main Street at 5:30. If anyone has a golf cart they'd like to decorate, we'd love to have, lots of them. And there are a lot of golf carts around the village because I see them going by. So just decorate them. On behalf of all the members of the Osterville Business and Professional Association, I ask for your continued support as we attempt to keep the wind farm off of Dowsers Beach and disrupting our business community. And as we try to keep Osterville the village we have all enjoyed and loved for so many years. Respectfully submitted, Gail Nightingale, Chairman of the OBPA.
Thank you. Thank you, Gail. Really appreciate that. And tonight our town councilor, we have a report from the town councilor every meeting, and he wasn't able to come tonight. So we're going to pass that on, and we're going to go right to Save Greater Dowsers Beach, and they have a presentation on what's happening over at Dowsers Beach and through the village. Ms. Suzanne Collins.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us to come here tonight. I want to apologize if my ire and fire are a little bit high lately. Some of you may have received a mailer from Avangrid this week about myths and facts. What bothers me is that every time we have a legitimate concern and express that, it is deemed by that company as a myth. So I wrote my own myth and facts sheet. We have a whole bunch of them on back, and Stacy's back there. I think Stacy's still back there, so she can hand these. There she is. Stacy has them. So please pick it up if you are so inclined. We've been very, very busy. Despite the fact that Avangrid is between their bids right now. They really don't have standing. They think they do, but we don't think they do. But I'll go through what we're up to, which is to never, ever give in. This is our wonderful. This is our wonderful steering committee. We have some expertise on this committee. We try to be very professional. We do our research. We know what we're talking about every single turn. So I just wanted to acknowledge these folks and their special expertise. I really don't have much expertise. I do a lot of writing and kvetching, I guess. I don't know. But anyway. We have so many supporters to encourage Avangrid to do the right thing and find somewhere else to land their cables. We have over 4,800 signatures on our two petitions. One's online at change.org, and the other, of course, you've seen is paper. That's actually an older number. We now have 1,020 people following us on our Facebook page, I would say, except for a couple of, I don't know, trolls. These people are our supporters, and it is locked down. It's an informational Facebook page, so if you just open it up and read our stuff, there's a pretty much a regular update about what we're up to, what they're up to, and so forth. We have over 700 emails on our distribution lists. These are people who volunteer their emails to hear from us. We're not climate change deniers. It's ridiculous to say that we are. We want to save the planet. I have grandchildren. I'm guessing quite a few of you do as well. We want to leave them a planet that's viable. What we don't want to see is this movement to go to renewable energy being done in such a way that local environments are needlessly invaded. We're not opposed to clean energy initiatives at all, including ocean-based wind power. And we're certainly not opposed to the clean water initiative you're seeing happen in the town of Barnstable, which includes, of course, the CWMP, the sewer project. What we do say is it's a complete conflation of the truth to say that we need Avangrid to do our sewering project. Well before they showed up, we had planned a sewering project. My thing about the 3 bays need right now is that if the town is willing to rearrange the schedule for sewering to help with the 3 bays situation because of Avangrid, we should just do it anyway without Avangrid. If not, that's how I feel. Thank you. We want to prevent, of course, the use of douses for these 3 massive electrical cables from a future wind farm. It's 1/3 again as large as what they're proposing for Craigville and what they did at Covels. We are working hard to convince the town council that dealing with Avangrid just isn't worth it. We want to preserve Article 97 protections of the beach. There's a rumor floating around that really they don't need the town's permission. They can just go straight to the EFSB, which is the Energy Facility Siting Board, and the EFSB will say, well, the heck with the town, we'll remove these protections. That is a complete misreading of the constitutional amendment known as Article 97 that preserves historic and recreational spaces for the people of the Commonwealth. And we're going to fight that in court to the bitter end. The town, thank you. The town is the entity that has to ask the legislature to remove Article 97. My reading of the EFSB is they will not move if they know the town does not remove those protections. If the town wants to maintain that protection of douses in the causeway, the EFSB will not be jumping to overrule the town, because that's how that constitution is written. It starts with the people. What a concept, right? But anyway, and we also are working hard to convince the state there's a much better way to do this, despite anything Avangrid says. This is why we care. This is, to tell you the truth, I'm at the point now where I hope the Craigville project doesn't happen. But Douse's, what raised our anger and upset and energy, I guess, is the fact that this is called an ecotherm. It's a transition zone in your environment between the ocean and the land. It's an estuary. It's a major watershed on Cape Cod. I've spoken before about what it drains. Begins with Lake Quaquaquet. Okay, you can imagine what's flowing into the Centerville River, into East Bay, and that should never be disturbed. After decades and decades of indiscriminate human land use, whatever is in East Bay should stay where it is. There should be no construction in this area. It's a wildlife habitat. How many of you enjoy Douse's Beach all winter long? Just to watch the birds, watch the animals, and see what's happening on the beach. It's just a beautiful system that we love. I think one of the most important aspects is it's an accessible recreational area. The fishing pier is used by people who are mobility impaired. It enhances their way of life, their joy of life to no end. And for Avangrid to say, oh, it will be accessible during my how many ever years of construction, sometimes they say 3, sometimes they say 2, sometimes they say 1. But anyway, I'm guessing maybe 2, maybe more. They say it'll be accessible the whole time. Who the heck would want to go there? Have you seen those machines? The dirt, the noise, it's not a place anyone would want to go during construction. Gotta try to do this without losing it. These are wonderful pictures. John Hauser was very kind and shared the pictures from 2011 and 2021. But as you can see from this, that's the hurricane of 1944. And where that water is exactly where they want to do the heavy construction. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. 2011 flooded, 2021 flooded. 3 days before Christmas, I went down there, flooded. It floods 2, sometimes 3 times a year. Whenever there's a coastal storm and it happens to coincide with high tide, the causeway is underwater. And so is the parking lot where they want to dig one of these 3 giant underground electrical vaults. It's ridiculous. See, I told you my iron fire was
The Dallas Beach eroding too?
No, it's actually a treating.
Eroding?
Yeah, but that's another story. We'll get to that. They say they're gonna protect this and that bird. That's ridiculous. You're not gonna, I mean, can you imagine those piping plovers that were all kept away from and dealing with, the noise of the construction? What was the date the first one showed up? Do you recall? I think it was April 18th. Well, Avangrid will be in full, construction. They would be, I have to use the future conditional tense. They would be in full construction mode when these birds show up, okay? You think they're gonna land there, they're gonna raise their babies there? Methinks not. You know about the horseshoe crabs, the blue crabs, the eelgrass that's right offshore. There's actually a complex habitat directly offshore of Douse's Beach that should never be touched. And these are all arguments we'll be making as we go through our process. I talked about the 3 underground electrical vaults. You need to know, they talk about manhole covers, like, nice little round manhole covers. These are vaults. They are 66 feet long. 8 feet wide, no, 9 feet wide, 8 feet wide, 9 feet deep, something like that. And they're 2 feet under grade. Okay, they're massive electrical vaults. One of my personal issues with this whole plan is they're planning to put these things in a recreational area. They were here at a meeting in the spring and I asked them, can you guarantee these things will never catch fire, smoke, or blow up? And the answer was clear as the nose on my face. Of course, we can't guarantee that. You don't put this kind of thing in a recreational area with one narrow means of egress on and off, simply put. And of course, they want to route them through our residential streets, narrow residential streets, through our neighborhoods and through our beautiful business district that attracts people from all over Cape Cod. If you've gone to Osterville, it's such a beautiful place. Well, it is, and we want to keep it that way. And those merchants deserve to continue their business uninterrupted by this ridiculous plan. We're fighting the regulatory review process on my Facebook page, well, our Facebook page. I'm sorry, I just kind of manage it. Every time we make a filing, if they file, we file. And we're always very, very, what would the word be? Strong in our opinions, Hector and Adam. But I will tell you this, they, in DPU, in that docket, there are three dockets that we're following. In that docket, the electrical companies and the Department of Energy Resources requested that the contracts they defaulted on, that they did not honor, be terminated. And we wrote and we said they shouldn't be terminated because you should honor your contracts. And if they rebid, it's going to drive electrical prices through the roof for the people of the Commonwealth. We basically had three arguments. Lo and behold, Hector sent me something a few days ago. Look what the Attorney General's office wrote, basically the same thing. They should have honored their contracts, and if they didn't, our view is they shouldn't be allowed to rebid the new round of what they call 83C solicitations for renewable energy from the offshore. That they should be disqualified on that basis alone. That's our argument, because we think if they're disqualified, there's a good chance they'll finally pack their tents and go away. We've been going to every single town council and speaking. I'm speaking tomorrow night for my 3 minutes. You get 3 minutes to talk at town council, and I'm going to talk for 3 minutes and let them know the extent of the support we have. And of course, through personal contact, I don't know, radio. I've been on Ed Lambert a few times. That's interesting. That always brings a lot of attention to our cause. In print and broadcast and on social media. That's how we let ourselves be known. And those signs all over, not only Osterville, but Centerville now, Marston's Mills, Katuitt, lots of people want them. I wanted to say this one thing I've added. This shows us that this is a Barnstable-wide issue. Yes, Osterville is 41% of the people who sign our petitions. But look at the orange one. That's Centerville, 20% from Centerville. And Hyannis is the sort of mustard colored chunk of the pie chart. They're 15%. Now these numbers are mostly derived from the petitions that people signed at the beach and around this town. For example, when there are village days, people sign them. So what's happening is, excuse me, people come to Osterville and they come to Dowses Beach from the other villages, and we want to impress this upon the town council. This is not just this is the most insulting thing we hear, in my opinion. That's just Osterville NIMBYism, which really ticks me off. This is a village caring about its quality of life. And I think it's clear that there are people from other villages who also care about the quality of life in our town.
Suzanne, leave that slide there.
Oh, you want to leave that slide? Then you're next, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm getting kicked off, but that's great. This man, he's just wonderful, and I just want you to listen to it. No, you want that. That's wonderful. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Now, this is a pretty friendly audience, but I'm gonna bore you with some business and financial details. So first of all, who I am, I'm Hector Gunther. I'm an active volunteer in town. I do Medicare counseling. I do volunteer tax preparation for seniors. And I'm also vice chair of Barnstable's, it's called the Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee. Or CFAC. We advise the town council on the annual operating budget and the capital budget. And I've been on that committee for 6 years. Before I retired, I was a banker at JP Morgan and some number of other investment banks in New York. And during my 30-year career, I advised and financed big companies, just like Avangrid and its corporate parent, Iberdrola. So I know how these companies operate, and I have a few insights into them. I'm speaking tonight in my personal capacity as a member of the Save Dowses Beach Steering Committee. I'm here to do two things. First, to give you some background about Avangrid. It's important to know that their core business is regulated electric and gas utilities in 4 states. They've never done an offshore wind project before. Offshore wind is a brand new business. And then secondly, tonight I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on possible revenues and the very real risks to our community that the landing of 3 proposed offshore wind projects. Vineyard Wind at Cobbles Beach, that's the one that's under construction now. The second one, Park City Wind, to be constructive if it's finally approved at Craigville Beach. And then the third one, our favorite, Commonwealth Wind, proposed to land at Dowses Beach. And to sum up my talk tonight, I put it in 5 words. Offshore wind has onshore impacts. And that's what we're talking about tonight. So first, a little background on the company and offshore wind. As I said, it's a brand new venture. It's a startup for Avangrid. They've never built one. They've never operated or maintained one. They've never run high voltage power cables undersea to shore, beneath miles of residential roadways. And in Barnstable, if all 3 projects are approved, it's going to be about 20 miles of cable through 20 miles of our streets. And they've never built massive substations, 3 in this case, to receive offshore wind power. So if Avangrid has its way, it's going to be doing all of these things in the form of 3 industrial wind power projects for the first time in Barnstable, the community that we call home. We will be the guinea pigs. And once these projects are installed and Avangrid has moved on, we Barnstable residents and business owners will have to live with this risky, high voltage infrastructure for decades. In other words, it's the biggest thing to happen in this town in the last 100 years, other than the sewer project. It's going to have huge unknown impacts on the town. Another thing that's important, and here we get into a little wonky stuff, it's important to know how the company has legally structured these 3 offshore wind projects. They're going to each of Vineyard Wind, Park City Wind, and Commonwealth Wind, if it's approved and built, will be set up as a 4th tier limited liability company subsidiary. Limited liability company, the acronym is LLC. The immediate corporate parent, the 3rd tier subsidiary of Avangrid Inc., is Avangrid Renewables LLC. So 3 LLCs, immediate parent, another LLC. So what does this mean? I mean, it's kind of wonky stuff. But bottom line, it means that the ultimate parent companies, Avangrid Inc., which is a public company, it's traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and its corporate parent, Iberdrola SA, which is a Spanish domiciled power company and the 4th largest power company in the world. They will be very well protected and insulated from almost anything that goes wrong at the project level. Their liability, by definition, is limited, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So let's talk a little bit about revenue to the town of Barnstable and the risks to the town of Barnstable. And Suzanne mentioned radio shows. Well, Avangrid heard Suzanne on the radio and they started buying time on WXTK.
Yeah.
95.5. Do I have that right? So they've been running radio commercials, and many of you probably have heard them. And they've been saying publicly that the company will be paying, and this is a quote, over the next several years, hundreds of millions of dollars, end quote, to the town of Barnstable. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Those numbers are not only completely made up by their PR people, they're also not supported by basic financial analysis. And lastly, if you can believe it, their numbers include the Commonwealth Wind project, which hasn't even been awarded to the company, never mind contracted with the town of Barnstable. So they come up with it, their latest set of numbers is $217 million that they're gonna be paying to the town of Barnstable, but it's bogus. Don't believe it. So now I have to figure out how to do this.
And Hector, we filed false advertising plans with the AG, right?
Yeah, and then that Adam Myrick, I've got it, Susan, makes a good point. We contacted the Secretary of Environmental and Energy and Environmental Affairs, EEA, and then we filed a complaint with the Attorney General's office about false advertising. Have I heard anything yet? No, but we need to maybe. So, Avangrid says hundreds of millions, but let's recalculate Avangrid's numbers to make them more accurate and based on reality. And we do that first by projecting revenues to the town based on what Avangrid is contractually committed to pay. And then secondly, we compute that total in today's dollars. And we do this by analyzing the revenues to the town as spelled out in two agreements that have been executed by the town with Avangrid. The first one is the Vineyard Wind Host Community Agreement, or HCA. That was signed on October 3rd, 2018. And then the second HCA is the Park City Wind HCA, which was signed in November 2022. So if you do this math, and you do the math, Avangrid is contractually obligated. This is what we're giving them credit for, because this is what they're legally obligated to pay to the town in today's dollars about $23 million, not hundreds of millions, 23 million. And that amounts, and I hesitate to make the comparison, but as a percent of this, of the sewer project, the 30-year CWMP, that's about 1.5% of the cost of the CWMP. So when Avangrid says to you all, hey, we're gonna be a partner for the town and we're making a material contribution to the sewer project, it ain't so. And then, as we said before, in short, Avangrid is vastly overstated its numbers, making false claims and engaging in misleading, if not false, advertising. So that's the end of the financial stuff. If people are getting to work. So I'm going to end with a few words about the many risks of these projects and risks. So part of my banking career, I was a senior credit approver at Citigroup in their leveraged finance business. So my job was to look at highly leveraged deals and find out whether they were worthwhile and safe to lend into. So I was a risk manager, and so I'm used to looking at the downside of projects. And there are a lot of downsides to this, which you won't hear Avangrid talk about very much. We agree with Avangrid. They say, well, an environmental calamity or catastrophe or an economic disaster over the life of these projects is low. And we agree with that. You know, it's not 50%. And maybe it's not even 25%, but over 25 years, it certainly isn't zero. Suzanne talked about the explosion in the vaults. Adam Myrick, who's going to come up a little later and talk about some risks and then alternatives that Avangrid has to the Dowses project, will make the same point. But as I said, the risks are definitely greater than zero. And remember, we're living right with this stuff. You know, it's not 10 miles away. It's going to be right next. If you live on Riano Avenue, the high voltage cable conduits are going to be right under the road and next to your front yard. And by the way, the cable vaults, the splicing vaults, where the risk of explosion is higher, they'll have 3 at Dowses Beach in the parking lot, as Suzanne outlined. And then along the 6.7 mile route for the Commonwealth project, there'll be a splicing vault every half mile.
Oh.
So there could be, in theory, one in the middle of downtown. Every half mile or so. So the probability of a catastrophe is greater than zero. So let's imagine one or more of the following scenarios, and I'm just, I'm picking these up out of our research. So one scenario, massive explosion or fire beneath the Dowsers parking lot or a residential street or at the substation that's to be built for the Commonwealth Wind project. A structural collapse of the narrow causeway that connects Dowsers to East Bay Road. Remember, they have these cable conduits that are gonna be run under the town. They're 8 feet by 6 feet by 4 feet. Thermal concrete cable, and these are feet. These aren't inches. These are huge conduits. A third scenario, contamination of the town's fresh water by salt water or toxic fluids from the substations. And this is a risk of any of these 3 projects. There'll be 3 substations. Imagine a major hurricane. We're due for a category 1 hurricane. The last one was 1992 on the Cape. Imagine a major hurricane that destroys the wind turbines, which are 40 miles offshore, shutting down the power and therefore the revenue to the town. Imagine serious health issues caused by high levels of electromagnetic radiation from these high voltage cables. And the last scenario, and this is very, very important. We've been talking to town councilors about this. Permanent declines in residential property values, which will in turn translate to lower tax revenues to the town. So Avangrid says, oh, we're paying all this money every year. Well, what they haven't factored in is, and would be a very complex discussion, and Adam will talk about this a little more, but there's no question in my mind that property values along the 20 miles of cable routes will be affected to the downside. How much? You don't know, but if property values decrease, assessments decrease, and property tax revenues to the town decrease. And that can also affect or create lasting damage to our tourism-based economy in the town of Barnstable. So if one or more of these risk events come to pass, where will we look for compensation? That's a great question. Impossible to answer with certainty. But one thing is for sure, and then we're getting back to the LLCs now. We won't get much of anything from our 3 limited liability LLC company partners. And partners in quotation marks. That's a phrase that Avangrid loves to throw around. Oh, we're going to be your partners. More likely than not, those LLCs, if financial stress was put on them, the parent company would put them into bankruptcy. And this has happened repeatedly throughout American history. Think Enron. This is what happens when you have a subsidiary company that's occasioned a number of risks and you want to protect the parent company. You put the subsidiary into bankruptcy, and under bankruptcy law, that gives you a lot of rights as the owner of that subsidiary to walk away, to say, here, you take care of it. You, Barnstable, you take care of it. So if the LLCs are put into bankruptcy, guess what? We residents, business owners, and the town itself would have to get in line for compensation, just like any other unsecured creditor. And there's a banking term, but it basically means, unlike if you have a mortgage with your house, the mortgage is secured by the value of your house. And if you default, the bank can take your house to be repaid. We'll just be an unsecured creditor, residents, business owners, and the town itself. And, we'll have to get in line. And sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I understand that this is a pretty sympathetic audience. I think it's worthwhile going through some of these financial and legal basics, because as you listen to Avangrid at their frequent open houses where they say paint a rosy picture, but don't talk about the risks, they're real and they could happen to us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Myrick, who's going to talk a little bit more about risks and then talk about some alternatives, because Avangrid does have alternatives to Dow's speech. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Adam Myrick, a year-round resident here in Osterville. My background, I spent 23 years in energy. bringing projects to market. So onshore wind farms, natural gas fired power plants, solar plants. So this is my bailiwick. So it's kind of interesting. I didn't really expect this to be helpful or to come in handy, living here. And then this kind of, dropped on our beach and I'm like, okay, so let me get it done. So I want to talk a little bit about the alternatives. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the why. So you've heard from Hector about the numbers, the math, why is this bad risk reward for the town? You heard a bit from Suzanne on the environmental impact and the fact that it's an irreplaceable Barnstable treasure. I want to talk a little bit about the economics in a different sense. So, has anybody ever heard of the Beacon Wind Project? Beacon Wind Project is okay, so you've heard of it. That's south of Nantucket. They're actually running cables undersea all the way to industrial sites in Connecticut and Astoria. Queens, right? Another one, Ocean Wind. Anybody heard of that? Offshore in New Jersey? So they're running into two decommissioned power plants, the Oyster Creek Nuclear Plant and the BL England plant. So what they're doing, they're being smart. They're saying we have industrial sites that already have interconnection capacity. Oh, and sorry, go ahead, speak up a little bit, or we can hear me? Yeah, so they're going to the Oyster Creek Nuclear Plant and the BL England plant in New Jersey, which are two decommissioned power plants. So, I was always taught, reduce, reuse, recycle. They're making use of the reuse part, right? So they're saying we have electric infrastructure, rather than build it fresh, let's use what we have. So they're going undersea, again, a longer distance than we're talking about for this project. So for this project, why is it landing at Dowses? The answer is because it's cheap. It's very quick. It's a short, straight line path. And if you look at the numbers, so if you look at the net present value, like we all want better housing affordability, but 22 million in net present value, that would buy you what? 2 waterfront homes in Osterville? 2 waterfront homes in Centerville? Like imagine the cost to actually buy a quarter of homes to connect, right? It's gonna be a whole lot more money than that. And Osterville will cite the cost and say it's gonna be more expensive if we have to run more cable to a different location. And we'll come back to that in a minute, so hold that thought in your minds. But here are the other alternatives that have been, put forward. One is called the South Coast variant. South Coast variant is Avangrid's own backup plan. Now, they've recently told us they've abandoned working on that, but interestingly, they have not told the feds that they've abandoned working on it. So we're trying to figure out exactly what the truth of that is, but that would go in probably around New Bedford, which incidentally is actually one of the fastest growing towns in the Commonwealth that actually needs some of this power and has industrial waterfront. The other one would be, well, there are others as well, but the Sandwich Harbor plant, you've probably seen the smokestack there, that's the canal plant. It's typically a peaking power plant, which means it's not running most of the time. It might run 10-15% of the year, primarily in the middle of winter when it's very, very cold, when that plant runs, or in summer when air conditioning demand is very, very high. JERA is a Japanese investment firm that recently bought that power plant. I had done business before with JERA, a very reputable firm. Part of their rationale for buying that facility was they said, we have spare capacity. Why don't you use our power plant, our transmission infrastructure to help bring this power to market? So there are alternatives. And are they work free? No, you have to work with the grid to say, can you interconnect? There may be more cost in terms of cabling to get to Sandwich. There may be more cost to go around the Cape and go to Pilgrim. But based on the distances we've talked about for Beacon and for Ocean, these are New Jersey projects and New York projects, it's certainly possible to do much longer undersea cables. Now, when you think about, let's dissect what Avangrid has said about the JERA or Canal Sandwich project. They've said, it doesn't really make sense. I think the analogy they used was, imagine renting a house, but you can't use it for 10 days a year. Like, oh, that's pretty clever. The bottom line is anywhere you plug in power of this magnitude, and make no mistake, these are huge plants. Commonwealth Wind is the size of 2 Pilgrim nuclear plants in terms of output. That's how much power it produces. Anywhere you want to plug that in, you've got to upgrade grid infrastructure. So I find it to be really, facetious to say, well, of course it can't accommodate it as is, right? But just like if you were putting let's say you buy an electric car tomorrow, you're probably going to have to add a circuit, in your house to charge it, right? It's not like you can simply keep adding indefinitely. That said, the upgrade cost there would probably be a lot lower. So when you get your electric bill every month, you pay 2 components. One is a commodity piece for the actual energy you consume, and one is for what's called T&D, transmission and distribution. Transmission and distribution is provided by regulated utilities. Regulated utilities earn a regulated rate of return. They are a monopoly. So they earn about a 10% rate of return. The cost to build all of this onshore infrastructure, to come ashore at Dowses, to build the 3 substations, to put the 20 miles of electrical cabling underneath the roads, it's not cheap. And so when they recently asked, they said, hey, electric utilities that build this stuff, what do you think about the plan at Dowses versus trying to go into, the canal station or trying to go to the South Coast variant or somewhere else? They said, no, we think this is the best plan. But of course they're gonna say that. Would you want to reuse infrastructure you're gonna earn no return on or a relatively small return? Would you rather build bright, shiny, new gold-plated stuff and earn 10% in perpetuity on it? Right? You don't ask the frogs if they want to drain the pond. It's completely ridiculous. So, people have said to me, well, Europe is doing offshore wind. This isn't that new. It's new for us, but it's not new for them. So let's talk about the Netherlands. Netherlands has 151 miles of coastline, relatively coastline constrained for Europe. All their projects come ashore in industrial harbors, ports, military bases. That's where they come ashore. And their grid is actually centrally planned by their utility. So utility looks at it and says, okay, here are all the different leases. Here are all the different projects we want to build. What's the most economical way and the most, least disruptive environmental way to bring these ashore? And that's how they plan it. So there's been a recent study by the Brattle Group. And Brattle Group is a consulting. I got it. Oh, you got it. Yeah, there we go. So this is a map of the South Coast variant we were kind of talking about here with foam. But if you go to savedowses.org, a lot of this is up there on the website. This is the Sandwich Harbor plant. So they're certainly aware. Now this is the Anbaric study, which is Anbaric is an undersea cable company, US-based company, founded in 2003, 2004, that has experience actually building and running undersea cabling. Now they've come and basically given an unsolicited bid, which if you know how state government works, an unsolicited bid can't be accepted because it wasn't part of an RFP. But they basically said, listen, we can do this cheaper with less impact. And I don't work for Anbaric. I don't, I have no interest in them, but I do think the plan is very credible. And the reason I say that is they hired the Brattle Group, who is a consulting firm that does a lot for a lot of S&P 500, Fortune 500 companies. And that report has actually shown significantly lower costs to doing it this way. So if you look at the planned approach, which is saying, show me all the projects that want to plug into Cape Cod. And then I will show you what the best way is to do this. And not necessarily all at once, but to phase it in. An analogy I like to use is when you put a Christmas tree up, you don't plug each light bulb in individually, right? They're all on a single strand, you plug them all in at once. Otherwise, it's gonna be a complete mess in your living room. So these guys have shown not only is it significantly cheaper, so I don't have a pointer, but you can see that the midpoint, if you look to the right there, the midpoint of the cost for the unplanned, which is one-off, basically come into Dallas, come into Craigville, come into Cubbles, 1.7 billion, right? The midpoint for a planned is 550 million. I mean, that's $1 billion. And, guess who's going to be paying for that $1 billion in perpetuity? It's ratepayers, right? It's going to show up in your transmission and distribution bills in perpetuity. Because not only do they have to be built, they have to be maintained. So what's also interesting is if you look at the planned approach versus the unplanned approach in the top right, the Brattle Group study found that the unplanned approach, the spaghetti approach, also leads to a much less stable, much less reliable electrical grid for all of us here. Now, you wouldn't think, oh, we're plugging in a big power plant right next door. Wouldn't our supply be far more reliable? Like when I fill up water balloons for my kids and they turn on the spigot too fast, they pop. Right? It's not a good thing. So it's going to be very expensive, not only in terms of the dollars to build it, but also expensive in terms of the lifestyle impact here. The USDA says 4 hours without power and your food is spoiled. Your food is spoiled in your refrigerator. So for many of us, if we have to go do a second round of grocery shopping in a week, our budgets can handle it. But we have a lot of people in our community where that's not the case, right? These are the things that I don't think people are necessarily thinking about. And so is the Brattle Group study credible? The software they use is called GE Maps. GE Maps is the standard software that the actual electrical grids So people may not know this, some of you may know this, but the electrical grid in New England is run by a nonprofit called ISO New England, who's tasked only with reliability, right? They don't make money. They don't want to encourage use or anything else. They're just focused on reliability. If you want to go and build a new factory that's going to use a lot of power, or you want to build a new power plant that's going to inject a lot of power, you have to ask for a grid interconnection study. They then use GE maps to say, okay, can the grid handle it? Can it not handle it? What are the upgrades that are required? So coming into Sandwich would require a grid interconnection study. Coming into Pilgrim would require a grid interconnection study. The cost is $1 million or $2 million. It's absolute peanuts in the grand scheme of things relative to a project of 5 billion, 7 billion. I mean, we're talking about $1 million or $2 million, and we're talking about typically a 1 year, maybe a 2-year turnaround. Right? We're not starting construction anywhere inside that time frame. So why would Avangrid not want to do this? It's because it's probably going to cost them more, and it's going to cost them time. They want to come to market as soon as possible and as cheaply as possible. But the economics are really from their perspective, not the holistic, ratepayer perspective. And so, I want to talk about some of the other risks, in particular, if we bring this power ashore at Dowses. We've talked a little bit about it, but think about the disruption to the community when you actually have the streets being dug up. I know people have said, well, they're going to get dug up anyways for sewering, right? We're just going to be there. We'll do them both at the same time. Actually, probably not. It's probably going to be twice. There are also complications because electrical wires of that size, cables of that size, throw off tremendous heat. So you actually may have to have them on separate sides of the street. The existing water lines may have to be far away because otherwise the heat from the lines can actually cause bacteria. It's like a petri dish, right?
Yes.
Gas lines, I mean, gas and high voltage, that sounds great, right? So there are all these things people haven't talked about or haven't really thought about. It gets kind of glazed over when they say, oh, it's all going to be once. Not the case. So there's certainly disruption there. The loss of green space, for the substations. If you actually go ashore at a Superfund site, right? The Industrial Revolution in this country happened in the Northeast, right? There are plenty of Superfund sites, plenty of coastal areas that are heavily industrialized that don't have eelgrass, that aren't estuarine, that aren't barrier spits. Come ashore at one of those. It's going to make a heck of a lot more sense than potentially spoiling, a pristine beach. The grid stability, we talked about property values. So this is one where they've said that we're spreading misinformation, which really puts sand in my shorts, because if you go back to 1948, like the first study I could find on home values and the impact of electrical lines is 1948. Now, over the years, there were a lot of studies that had no conclusion. They said we can't really deduce a relationship, but the difference is because they were trying to do it on individual homes. And so let's say that I live next to Hector, I live next to Suzanne, and my house, I haven't done any of it. It's a dilapidated mess, right? Hector has put a new sunroom in. Suzanne's put a brand new kitchen in. The homes are very different. So when you try to line up side by side homes, one that's near the electric lines, one that's not, it doesn't necessarily work. So maybe they're right next to the electric lines and mine's not, and they all sell for the same price. But in reality, their homes are far nicer. So some of the studies said, well, how do we eliminate this? And they started looking at actual vacant lots. And on vacant lots, they found that vacant lots are impacted by anywhere from 10 to 44%. Now, if you think about what percentage of a home price is the land, certainly around here, it's a lot higher than the national average of 10 or 20% of the home value. So the bottom line is on these studies, and there are several of them, that they're going to show generally the impact is it's negative. Could it be as negative as 9% on the total home price? Yes. Could it be as, only as negative as 1 or 2%? Yes. But when you're talking about, the kind of contribution from Avangrid that they've got out there currently in terms of what they're contractually required to do, it doesn't take much in terms of reducing home prices by 1, 2, 5, 8, 9% for the tax implications for the town to be more than offsetting the revenue coming in from the host community agreements. And so what we don't know right now, we don't know. Are you going to have a sticker on your mailbox or on your sidewalk saying high voltage lines nearby? We don't know. Could it impact your ability to get homeowners insurance? We don't know. Now, they've said they've talked to bankers and talked to insurance people, and there's no issue. So, I mean, they should bring those bankers and insurance people forward, and then we can say, okay, so you're telling us it's not an issue, but we don't know. You know, I think the other thing that's interesting too is the radiation. Because if you look at, you know, why historically homes have been worth less, because of the visual, the eyesore nature of the overhead lines. So it's been really three things people have cited. It's one is the eyesore, two is the buzzing noise, and three are the health issues, you know, from the electromagnetic radiation. Now, the science on the electromagnetic radiation is very mixed. You know, I think there have been studies, you know, trying to link it to childhood leukemia. There are other studies that have shown no conclusive link. And so I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know what the risks are or aren't, but I'm a facts guy. And so I went to try to find court cases and said, okay, I want to look in the bluest of blue states. I'm going to look in California. And they have found in eminent domain takings. So this is where a company says, I want to build transmission through your land. I'm going to take a corridor. What should your compensation be? And typically there's a formula for that, where they say what percentage of the land is no longer buildable because I'm taking it, or, you know, have I bisected, let's say, a parcel that otherwise would have been buildable and therefore I have to take the whole parcel. In these two cases, they were big tranches of land. And the landowner fought back and said, the value of my land is going to be lower, not just where you're taking it, but along the road, because of the electromagnetic radiation, and basically the fact that these lots are going to be worth less. So you've now had, and this one was in California with San Diego Gas and Electric versus Daly, and the court found that even if you can't prove that the health impacts are negative from the radiation, what you can prove is there is a real negative value on property prices. Therefore, San Diego Gas and Electric, you need to pay this landowner for the loss of the value in your eminent domain taking. Now I said, well, let me find on the other end of the spectrum. So in Kansas, guess what? Deepest red state, courts found exactly the same thing. You don't have to prove the health impacts. All you have to prove is a negative impact on value. So there's all the misinformation. You know, when you hear people saying that we're, you know, just throwing donkey dust, you can ask them and say, show us the studies you've got. What do you have that shows that property prices are going up? I even heard that property prices are going up because of, you know, proximity to green energy. You know, also, I just, out of curiosity, I checked the listings. I like to do this. You guys probably do too. Every once in a while, just check the listings and see what's for sale locally. And I saw a listing that went up maybe 2 weeks ago. And the second selling point on the house, I think it was like a $1 or $2 million house, was proximity to beautiful Dowses Beach. And so, you know, when you think about property values, there are people that are going to choose. They say, I can live in Harwichport. I can live in Hyannisport. I can live in wherever else. There are lots of nice places to live on the Cape. All it takes is a few people voting with their feet. And I happen to know a couple of people already that have said if this goes forward, they plan on putting the house on the market because they don't want to be here during the construction and they think it's just going to impact the value overall. So I wanted to leave you guys with just a little bit more on the actual real estate studies. So if you're interested more in this, there's a great article in the Wall Street Journal in 2018. The Journal of Real Estate Research in 2018 as well has a study from two professors from the College of Charleston that are that one I mentioned, the lots. You've got PolitiFact has some data out there. Gustan Cho Associates, the 2013 has the Appraisal Journal, which is, I gotta imagine, riveting reading. You imagine like a publication designed just to appraisal, but yeah. So those are kind of the bits that we wanted to talk about there. When it comes down to it, you know, if you're not swayed by the environmental side of it, right, and you're not swayed by the thousands of beautiful side of it, and you're not swayed by the disruption to the town side of it, then be swayed by the, I don't like having to pay more for an inferior product, right? There are other ways to bring this power to shore. It's going to cost you less. So anyways, thank you for your time and attention.
I told you there was wonderful expertise on our committee, didn't I? I want you to know we're all volunteer group. We don't take any money for ourselves. We do ask for donations for a kitty to pay our attorney. We've engaged in a law firm based in Brewster. They are land use experts. And we'll be working with them going forward. If this does make it to the EFSB, they're going to help us get through that process. Stacy back there, she's been handing out, we have an informational piece that includes a lot of names of appointed and elected officials. We'd like you all to take at least 3 and write to these people and say, no, this shouldn't happen here, and here's why. We also, there's all kinds of information about how you can help, spread the word, stand up and say no, help us do this. Because we really think letting this international multi-billion-dollar corporation make this decision for us is just not the American way. And with that, I will ask if there are any questions or, yeah.
First of all, thank you for my question. Don't know if this was something you really want to address, we have to bring this to these people. My biggest concern is that there are not honest brokers on the Commonwealth level. I believe this is a rigged bid.
Oh, you mean on the state, at the state?
Yeah, because I do not see a company gladly paying a $50 million fine, which they supposed fine, and then being allowed back in the bidding process. I don't know what the bidding process in this Commonwealth is. Your Safe Dowses Beach seems to have done all the homework. Are these questions being asked at the environmental regulatory level? Why is a grassroots organization doing all the homework and the regulators doing nothing?
I
And
think
one of the answers,
it's excellent.
One of the reasons I think is because the person who is the spokesperson for Avangrid was a former head of regulatory affairs in Massachusetts. It was a revolving door.
They were
all in politics. And so I'm just gonna say this. I think when you're contacting your your political apparatus. Let's talk about something about being American values and whatnot. This company, major shareholder is the Qatar Holding Company. It is from the Kingdom of Qatar.
It's the sovereign fund of
This-
Qatar.
Of the King of Qatar, absolute monarchy. This state purports to be very LGBTQ friendly. The Kingdom of Qatar is not. And I think some of these people have to be held to account to where they're getting their money from. And that's the kind of thing I think maybe your group doesn't want to engage in, and when you're contacting your congressperson and your state representatives, this would be like taking money from, I was involved in divestiture of South Africa and funds in college and stuff like that in the apartheid regime. And this would be like taking money from them in the 1980s. I'm not prepared to turn over my electric grid to the government of Qatar. And, the other things, I don't know how these things are supposed to be secured.
I think you have made a whole bunch of excellent points. We have said over and over again, we have personal feelings about this industrialization of the ocean, but we keep them to ourselves because if we dilute our message, we're putting Dowses at risk, we feel. It's really important for us to be focused on Dowses. However, if you take the list that we're providing and write to these folks and let them know, there's no restrictions on what you can say about this whole boondoggle, to tell you the truth. Letting this company run roughshod. They get invited into Barnstable by Barnstable officials. And these officials were talking about Coble's Beach. And they had this incredible celebration at Coble's. So Barnstable said yes. Well, I think there are folks in town hall who realize that they didn't say yes to this. Does that make sense? Craigville came next, and then Douses, and we heard from someone in town hall that when Avangrid told them they were going after Douses, the response was, well, good luck with that. And, we have created this buzzsaw in their face, and we are gonna continue to do so. We're not going anywhere. We're gonna make their lives miserable. But you guys are free to say and do anything you want with everybody from Governor Healy and her entire administration about this issue. Thank you for saying that.
Let me just add to something that Suzanne said. So we've had one meeting in person at the state. We set it up through Rebecca Tepper, who's the Secretary for Energy and Environmental Affairs. She put 3 of her senior people in the room with us. And we went through a series of talking points. We had a nice picture of Dowses Beach on an easel. And they listened very politely, and we had a good dialogue. It's, you know, it's early in the permitting process, so there's only so much that they can say, but they were listening. And then when we concluded, the woman who had to leave, she said, I have to leave in 5 minutes, but tell me about Avangrid. And we were struck by that, because, and my first response was, is this on or off the record? And then my second reply was, we're not here to bash Avangrid, we're here to save Dowses Beach. But she pressed us. Ken Kimmel, you were alluding to him, he was a former energy and former EEA commissioner. So you're right, he's gone back and forth. Why do you think Avangrid hired him? Because he said to them, look, I'm really plugged in to the state. Anyway, so we've started the dialogue with the state. You all can help by writing, calling, knocking on their doors, just to say, Dowses, this is wrong.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, Hector, for jumping in, but I'm very excited about what you said, Sarah. Everyone that's in the town of Barnstable needs to find out who is protecting our community, okay? Our town council for precinct 5, town councilor, was in this very room and said that he would vote against Article 97, which article of the Constitution, which protects Dowses, okay? So as individuals in the community, where we need to start is where you put your vote in November. I don't know what the dates are, but talk to the people that are running for town council and make sure that they stand with us. You know, we need to know where they stand.
They would have to approve by a 2/3 majority to ask the legislature to remove the protections from Dowses Beach. That's how it works. It starts at the town level. We have said publicly, I certainly said publicly on the radio, this is a campaign issue. Every one of those counselors is up for election this fall because of the census process. It redistricted all of the precincts. So every counselor is up for election. So if you have friends in other villages, make sure to ask them to ask the people running for town council where they stand on this issue. I think it's going to be one of the biggest campaign issues Barnstable has faced in a long time. Yes.
I just, when we were voting this last time, I had somebody come to my house to say, do you vote for me? I asked how they felt about this. He says, oh, no, I'm not against it. Well, as it turned out, he was fair.
He's for it, yeah. Yeah.
And then I came to one of the first meetings we had with the town council that had here, I mean, here at the library. And they knew nothing. They knew nothing about what was going on. They hadn't done any homework, and yet it had been okay. It must get very frustrating.
Oh, no, I'm having a blast.
I don't blame you. It's super complicated. I mean, I know early on, the 2 things I would hear were, are you for green energy or against green energy? You're in one camp or the other. And then are you for sewering or are you against sewering? So, no discussion of nuance, no discussion of the subtleties, no discussion of the risks. Was simply, let me see if I can quickly put you in one of these camps. And that's going to determine, please don't ask more questions. And this is really just, that's all you need to know. And so I don't blame the town councilors. They're super busy. They're not energy experts, but we spent a lot of time over the last year meeting with them one-on-one and saying, actually, these are some of the risks. These are some of the questions you should ask for.
Well, and they should become experts, shouldn't they? Just like you are.
Yeah, well, at least knowledgeable. Yeah.
Yeah, at least knowledgeable. Yes.
Just a little aside, So when all this started to happen,
Yes,
so just pre the last meeting we had here, I subscribed to the Cape Cod Times. I think the market basket flyer is more interesting. I put it on digital every day of the Sunday paper. I didn't receive the first Sunday paper for 9 months. And all of a sudden, it was in a puddle at the end of my driveway. And then I just went up and Googled Cape Cod Times on this very issue. There's no coverage.
no,
It is being totally silenced. And I think at some point, we ought to rally in the streets, start in Osterville, walk down to the beach, make a big hoopla and see if they can ignore that. You know, it's really time to just, no, I think we need publicity because if we're not getting it in the paper, the media is just, it's green, it's.
no, there's absolutely no coverage of opposition. And that's what I've noticed. We were in the parade, the wonderful parade, and even Uncle Sam showed up. And as we marched, we had a beautifully decorated truck, John Melchiono's truck. We had people carrying signs and wearing red, white, and blue hats and, you know, Save Delsa's Beach signs. And as we marched through the village, I couldn't get over the applause coming from each side. And I'm thinking, and I invited the Cape Cod Times to cover it. Not a peep, didn't show up. And I was thinking this would show them that the village, you know, and the town doesn't want this, but they don't care. And they're never going to care because they have a single thought in their minds. We need to save the planet. Well, of course we do, but we don't ruin the environment to do it. That's been our point all along. So.
I think if you want their attention, November, get out and vote.
Brian?
I don't have more actually mentioned it, but something about false or misleading advertising. I've been to most of these meetings. I do recall Mark L standing right up there, saying very specifically to the audience that these two projects, that's the Covington project revenue and the requirements for sewage for the town have nothing to do with each other, period.
Yep.
You listen to those open grid ads, pick his things. Yeah. And how do we stop it?
I don't know. Hector wrote to the Attorney General. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I mean, even if you wanna look at their claims and look at nominal dollars, not today's dollars, you're still not over $100 million.
Couldn't agree more.
So like, there's multiple hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't even know, you know.
So our town councilor is not advocating for us.
No.
He's not here. It's clear articulated. And. Drugs, hold on.
So how can you make a statement that the town council doesn't have responsibility? We empower the town council because the consent of the government is right here. We give them the authority. Take it away.
Well, that's what the vote is gonna be all about.
Take it away in November.
That's it.
That's it.
Take it away in November.
Finish your statement, Brian.
I
I think you kicked off a good
yeah,
conversation.
wait a minute, accepted advertising, sure, you can take some leeway with it if you're trying to promote a good perspective, but it's not the perspective the town wants. Our counselor is not backing us. And Mark L stood there and said, these two are in no way connected. And I'm gonna bet, if someone had the patience, I probably don't, to go through the tape of that meeting, they could get that actual clip.
Oh, yes.
All right, so who's gonna hold Mark L's accountable?
I also want to say this, Brian, they talk about like the sewer is going to come and we'll, make sure the sewer gets, well, they're planning to bang a left on East Bay, no sewer there. And then they want to bang a right on Wiano, get all the way down to in front of this building, and there's no sewer at all on Wiano. So, those folks who live on Wiano, if they think they're getting a sewer gift out of this, they're not. And one thing we've looked at is the plan itself. And it's very disingenuous to say that they're going to combine these two projects and then they won't rip up the roads. Well, listen, if they go away, the road will be opened once, end of story, but it'll be in the center and it will be on Old Barnes, on West Barnstable, Osterville Road. Did I say that backwards? Osterville, West Barnstable Road. I live off of Plums River, but anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very disingenuous in our opinion. And we have to say that all the time because the lawyers tell us to say, in our opinion. But, that's how we feel. So, any other questions for us?
Are you running in November?
No, ma'am. Yeah, no, I'm here fighting.
We do have a candidate for precinct 5 sitting up at the dais.
Yeah, I still haven't turned my papers in, but I will.
He will.
And,
I'll make sure he does. But, yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for your, oh, there's another question, yes.
Well, sort of a comment.
Yeah.
I think it's a very powerful move nowadays, the information we receive. It would be helpful if we had a plan that we could all execute. I mean, if everyone's gonna go home and do something or not do something. But if we had sort of an overall strategy that we could line up behind it.
That's an excellent point, and it's something I've been thinking about, like, we should have a political strategy, we should have an economic strategy, and so forth. I'm gonna work on that. I'll try to coordinate something.
That point, so we've got, that would make a big difference, make that 5,000, 10,000 signatures.
Yeah.
So we've been designated by the IRS as a 501c4 organization. So that means a couple of things. One is we cannot contribute to political candidates. However, we can endorse political candidates. That's one thing. Another important point is that if you make a contribution or if you make a second or third contribution, that is not tax deductible. But we will need, as a 501c4, to file a tax return in the upcoming months for the latest fiscal year. So we've set up this, but what we really need.
Just, okay, but you're not even doing.
It's unmuted.
What?
Just raise your.
Oh.
Somebody else.
Downstairs.
Oh,
Coming in downstairs.
Yeah, so what we really need is base about it, but we need money. Because if this gets to the EFSB, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay the law firm to do this.
Yeah.
We raised what, about $15,000?
Well, actually, we raised about 20, but
Yeah,
we paid for all those signs just to get the word out.
right.
But now when people ask for a sign, we ask them for at least a $20 donation to pay for the sign. We're starting doing that. And we're trying to get the signs in the other villages too. And to Hector's point, this will probably go to the EFSB. We were told that it could cost anywhere between $50,000 to $100,000 to fight it there. So we really have to raise money, but we have applied to be what's called an intervener, which means we need status. And we're going to meet with our attorneys in mid-September and talk about the strategy for gaining intervener status. And we need abutters. We just talked about this at a meeting on Monday. We need people who are abutters to the beach and also to the plan for them to go through. They have their plans are very public. And if this is going in front of your house and you're interested in joining us in our fight with the EFSB as an abutter, we're going to be reaching out to members of this community to say, please, can you put your name to this? And there won't be any risk to you. It's not a lawsuit, really. Well, technically it is, but yeah, we'll go in there and make this argument in front of the EFSB that this community absolutely does not want this to happen. Here are the reasons. We have X number of abutters, X number of residents of Osterville backing our claim, our request to be an intervener. So that's a little bit in the future because they just submitted in July their draft environmental impact report to the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act office. We have to respond to that by September 22nd, correct? So that's the next step in this. And I mean, I love to write. I tend to do the filings, write the filings. And, we all share them and they give me input and then we file them. There are 4 active dockets right now that we file all the time with. But that once it gets out of NEPA, then eventually it gets over to DPU, Department of Public Utilities, and they kick it to this board called the EFSB, and it's extremely expensive to be there and to fight in that setting, but we'll be there.
Right, and you make a good point, Suzanne, which is the MIPA process. And I don't know if this is on our website or on the Facebook page, but any citizen can write a letter of comment to MIPA regarding this DEIR draft environmental impact report. Comments are due by September 22nd. So if you're so inclined to write a letter of opposition or a letter of comment, please do so. Yeah.
If you go to DPU or MIPA websites, you can find the document. It's a little bit of hunting, but you can find it.
If I'm writing letters of time, you have collected all the knowledge. We want to help people out there. And we can actually, the letter is right. Place on the website where you can go with a hand, a 4-page handout, which includes appointed and elected officials, suggested appointment. Is your PowerPoint?
Yeah, I can put that up, but Stacy tells me we're out of the handout. Oh, we're running low, but
Something also our website.
the website has a library of documents on it. You're all caught up.
Because if you get a letter, the magistrate's just got them against it, it gets put. Yeah, no, you got some of the factual background, which has been incredible. If you put together, you're gonna have a better chance of here, and it is a multi-layered approach in fact.
Yes.
At the state, regional, and it's gonna be a multi-year. Yeah, one more question. I'm just wondering, at what point is a company that is in the bidding process allowed to spray paint the plan on a street?
So we did ask about that, and the local community liaison, I wrote to him and I said, is this you guys? No. And then a few days later, we attended, Hector and Stacy and I attended a meeting they had in downtown Hyannis with that community, with the Brazilian American community. And then he told me that, yes, indeed, this was us. And to tell you the truth, he felt a little like it wasn't the brightest thing to do, but they're doing it. And one of the points we made with DPU, these people are between bids. They shouldn't be allowed to continue to put their project forward, I think it makes an unfair bidding process. Does that make sense?
It seems like the fix is in when you're painting a street
Yeah.
Sunday.
Yeah, I know. So we can't stop them from doing this stuff because we've asked the state to tell them to stop. And apparently the state has declined to tell them to stop.
But to your point, if you look on Rihanna as an example, and your comments about gas and water lines, they're all right there showing you where they are, and the way they can avoid all of those by just putting those electrical lines.
There was another question over here.
Anybody that Mark Bell at this time try to become an expert, use fraction of the research that you've done, or to digest everything? We're educating them. Right.
I think you raised an excellent point, and there should be a person right now. Now, the town has stopped talking with them since they defaulted on their contracts. So there is no relationship between them and the town. But your point is excellent. There should be a point person in the town who's learning everything they can learn about this. We'd be happy to work with such a person, but such a person does not exist right now.
I'm just saying, somebody like that should be doing all the work that you've done, at least there.
But then what would I do all day? All right, I guess that's it. All right, thank you all so much.